Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I think it's worth discussing and switching gears and really hitting on what has happened at Alabama since the last time we talked about Alabama on Monday. Because obviously on Monday, the hire was fresh. Kalen Deboer's first press conference was fresh. But the bottom line, the question that everybody wanted to know, what kind of coaching staff was Kalen Deboer going to put together? And then more importantly, what kind of impact would that have on the current roster? There were a lot of players, including quite possibly their best defensive player Caleb Downs, who basically the reports were he wanted to see what the staff was before he made a final decision. Well, as I record here, Caleb Downs has not publicly made a decision, but what I am also here to say is this. If you are grading Kalen Deboer on the coaching staff that he put together, because that was the big question, right? He's not from the SEC. We don't know anything about him. What kind of staff is he going to be able to put together? I would argue that he has done as good of a job as you possibly could putting together a coaching staff. And listen, I'm far from the perfect expert on this. I think you can argue based on the combination of experience, success, whatever. I think you can argue this might be the best coaching staff in college football based on what we know right now. All right, so first of all, what has Kalen Deboer done since the last time we spoke? First off, the offensive staff is largely coming from Washington, okay? Now, that has its positives and negatives. Not a lot of ties to the South. I get all that. SEC country, you need to be able to recruit. I understand. Same time, did you watch Washington this year? Did you watch Washington last year? Because that is one of the most explosive offenses in all of college football. This past year, they were top 15 nationally in total offense. Last year, they were top 5. A year ago, they were the number 1 passing offense in college football. This year, they were number 2. And I know Jalen Milroe is a different quarterback than Michael Penix, but here's what I would also say about Michael Penix. Michael Penix was about a 53, 54% completion percentage guy his last year at Indiana. Comes to Washington and puts together the most explosive offense in the sport, is the quarterback for the most explosive offense in this sport. So I'm not saying that Kalen Deboer and his staff are going to turn Jalen Milroe into Michael Penix 2.0. One, I don't even know if you want him to, because Jalen Milroe has unique skills, especially with his legs, that even Michael Penix doesn't have. But at the same time, you wanted to keep that staff in place, and because Washington hired Jedd Fisch, that staff comes in place. Ryan Grubb, the guy, by the way, that Alabama tried to hire a year ago as its offensive coordinator. Well, guess what? He's coming to Tuscaloosa. It's just to be the offensive coordinator under Kalen Deboer. And so this is exciting news for Alabama. That offense, I think, is going to be so dynamic, so explosive, and what I've said all along, what I give credit to Kalen Deboer for, he is great at taking what his players do well and emphasizing and highlighting that. It isn't about, we run this system, we pass the ball 60 times a game, we run the ball 60 times a game. No, what he does is he puts together an offense that it highlights what his players do best. And so I'm not going to sit here and say what this offense is going to look like, but what I will say, whether it is Jalen Milroe, whether it is Justice Haynes, the star running back, whether it is some wide receivers that we might not even know about yet, either on this roster or coming over in the portal, this offense is going to be really good because it's going to have one of the best staffs in the country. More importantly, though, the big questions were, what was he going to do defensively? Well, we got our answer on late Monday night as we found out that Kane Womack, who was the sitting head coach at South Alabama, FBS school, coming off back-to-back bowl appearances, he decided rather than being a head coach, he was going to take a demotion and come be Kalen Deboer's defensive coordinator. And when I tell you, I think this is a mega win, I think this is a mega win. Now, first of all, we should acknowledge Kalen Deboer did try to get T-Rob, Travaris Robinson. I'm always tripping over names here. Forgive me. Been a long week, whatever. T-Rob was on Alabama's staff under Nick Saban. When Nick Saban retired, he took a job with Georgia. Kalen Deboer did try to get him to come back to Alabama and this guy declined. His choice, his prerogative. He's getting a title bump at Georgia. I'm sure he's getting a nice little salary bump as well. Obviously, he goes to Georgia. Will Muschamp is now going into an off-the-field role. But I just bring it up to say, listen, I know Alabama fans wanted this guy to come back. It didn't work out, and it's obviously crushing because now your biggest rival, or one of your biggest rivals, Kirby Smart, now has him under contract. At the same time, though, going out and getting a sitting head coach is pretty impressive, especially, by the way, a sitting head coach who is widely regarded as one of the best defensive minds in all of college football. This was a guy that a couple years ago, him and Deboer worked together at Indiana. That year, Kane Womack ended up being a finalist for the Broyles Award as one of the top one of the top assistant coaches in college football. His defense was a turnover forcing machine. Those years when Indiana was actually relevant in football, Kalen Deboer was the offensive coordinator. Then he leaves. Kane Womack was the defensive coordinator. And so that is impressive in its own right. But more importantly, to get a guy that was a sitting head coach to leave is unbelievable. And it speaks to the power of Alabama football. Credit to Alabama. Because what Kalen Deboer basically said, I'm so excited, I can't even get out my full sentences here. But what Kalen Deboer basically said was, look, my guy, you could be a head coach here, win 8-9 games. By the way, no disrespect to the Jags. Love my South Alabama Jags. Shout out Jags, okay? Same time, what he said was like, look, come here, be my defensive coordinator for 2 or 3 years. Let's ball out. You're going to have insane talent. And guess what? Here's the good news, is that if you do what I think you're capable of, you're going to get a better head coaching job than South Alabama. I guarantee that's what the conversation was. The next time kind of one of those second-tier SEC jobs opens up, the next time a good ACC job opens up, they're going to be like, okay, who can we get off that Alabama coaching tree? Because we're not going to miss a beat. So an elite defensive mind, and he is going to have access to the best talent that he has ever had. I'm here to tell you, man, I think that defense is not going to miss a beat. It is also worth noting, by the way, right before I got set to record, Maurice Linguist, who was the head coach at Buffalo, it was announced that he is actually leaving the head coaching job at Buffalo to become, I believe, the defensive backs coach at Alabama. And when you talk about, again, how about that for Kalen Deboer? Okay, so remember, 3-4 days ago, it was, what kind of staff can Kalen Deboer put together? Well, I don't know. A pretty good one. How about the fact that he convinced 2 sitting head coaches? Again, Maurice Linguist was the head coach at Buffalo, and he convinced him to leave that job to become an assistant at Alabama. This report was according to ESPN's Chris Lowe and Adam Rittenberg. It looks as though Linguist will be with the secondary working there. The other thing about this guy is a stud recruiter, okay? Interesting backstory on him. He was really kind of the guy that began to spearhead recruiting at Michigan when they kind of went through those changes after the 2020 season. They got a lot of guys locked in, a lot of guys committed, and then he ends up getting this head coaching job. Now, credit to that entire staff because they obviously have done it without him. But he's believed to be an elite recruiter, an elite, talent developer, etc. And he was a sitting head coach who is now coming to Alabama. So how about this? Again, to recap, Alabama's coaching staff. Everyone's trying to figure out, okay, Torres, what does it all mean? They got Alabama in the last 24 hours, a sitting head coach who had a top 15 defense these past 2 years at South Alabama, back-to-back bowl games, including a 10-win season last year, to leave a head coaching position to come to Alabama. Then they got another sitting head coach to leave a sitting head coaching job. That's what a sitting head coach does. He sits and he's the head coach. Got him to leave to come be a position coach. And my guess is he'd probably get elevated to defensive coordinator, whatever. Who's also an elite recruiter, who's also well-respected across college football. Kalen Deboer has done as good as you could have asked for. Now, finally, why I think it's important, it will be interesting to see how this impacts any players that could leave Alabama. The most important report that we have seen is that Caleb Downs, who was Alabama's best player, defensive player as a true freshman last year, had 104 tackles as a true freshman. He was a top 5 player in the class of 2023. 107 tackles, 40 more than any player on the team. 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. The report on Monday afternoon was that he wanted to see what was going on with the Alabama coaching staff before he made any final decisions. Obviously, with T-Rob going to Georgia, they would be a factor. I've heard some Ohio State buzz. He almost chose Ohio State out of high school. So as I record, this is always subject to change. We do not know, but I'll tell you this. Deboer has done about as well as you could ask for with his coaching staff, and I believe they are in prime position going